My plan is to hide, to avoid, but if I get busted, if I get captured, I'm not going to do a Rambo, I'm going to do a Gandhi. If I get captured, I'm not going to do a Rambo, I'm going to do a Gandhi. If I get captured, I'm not going to do a Rambo, I'm going to do a Gandhi.
26 years in prison. Insane. I don't know how these people go to sleep at night. The corrupt polar pin team of the Department of Justice. I'm talking about Karen Loeffler, Eric Holder, Loretta Lynch, Yvonne Lamore, Stephen Scrocky, Joseph W. Bottini, Judge Robert Bryan, the corrupt law enforcement officials with the Alaska State Troopers, Richard Sutherland, Fulton, Olson, the list goes on and on and on. Sandra Klein. All right, that's his address. I pray you guys write him a letter and let him know we have not forgot about him. I want to cover today the topic of, you know, this book right here. Yeah, this book right here. It's called Not Guilty, The Unlawful Prosecution of United States Senator Ted Stevens, Rob Kerry. It talks about the corruption of what they did in that case, right? It talks about the corruption of Bottini, the Department of Justice. It talks about Chad Joy FBI whistleblower report, how Nick Marsh committed suicide, how they used known perjured testimony, withheld exculpatory evidence, handed them a hard drive that was incredibly difficult to go through and unorganized with no table of contents, which I completely relate to because I've got, you know, Schaefer's Discovery hard drive, and they did the same thing there. It's the same prosecutor. Bottini, who was leading the case against Ted Stevens, was also leading the case against Schaefer Cox. But Rob Kerry writes about how corrupt the unlawful prosecution was of Senator Ted Stevens. And keep in mind, the jury came back and said guilty. It had to be overthrown by Judge Emmett Sullivan, and then there was a 525-page report that talks about how evil Bottini was. And he got a paid vacation, and he got to keep his job. And Scrocky, who's worked with him for 20 years, is now wanting to be a federal judge. So the point is that this book never goes into why they targeted Senator Ted Stevens. Of course, a few months later, he loses the election. He would have absolutely won had it not been for the trial and conviction. If it hadn't been for the corrupt Department of Justice, Senator Ted Stevens would have won the election. Get that through your head. But because they brought all these charges against him and they were corrupt and they unlawfully prosecuted him in a corrupt kangaroo court, right, he lost the election. Now, you got to ask yourself, why did they target Ted Stevens? And I've asked Schaefer that, and here's what he said. Ted Stevens was the Senate Majority Leader. He was also the most senior senator in the United States and third in line for the presidency if Obama and Biden bit the dust. He was perhaps more importantly the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, so he could stop any bill not scheduling it for a vote in his committee. He could and would block Obamacare. He had to be taken out so the medical population control could be brought in. I cover this in my Rule 60 Motion B. I think it's called Motion 60B. This is on Year of Jubilee. I can't type. yearofjubilee.com. If you go to that website, you can download Schaefer's Motion 60B. I highly recommend you read that. I've also read it into YouTube if you just want to listen to it while you're driving down the road. Schaefer goes on to say, I'm highly suspicious of the plane crash. As many of you know, Senator Ted Stevens died in a plane crash. I know just the place he crashed. It's a crash waiting to happen if someone decalibrates your altimeter before you take off. Schaefer Cox. So the people up in Alaska, the Polar Pin team, who used testimony from a child pedophile and made a deal with him so he could go free so they could get a conviction on this senator, are evil, evil, wicked people. Bottini is wicked. Yvonne Lamore drips and oozes wickedness from her very pores. Stephen Scrocky comes from the loins of Satan himself, and Karen Loeffler is, you know, the matriarch of it all. So We need to hold these people accountable. They need to be arrested once they're convicted in a court of law, and they need to be put in prison, and they need to lose their jobs. And I pray Psalms 109 on every one of them. But in any event, write Schaefer a letter. I wanted to get this video up about why United States Senator Ted Stevens was targeted. The last line of peaceful defense between a tyrannical government and the defendant is jury nullification. Educate yourself about jury nullification at fija.org. And no, they do not pay me to say that.